I've got some wonderful co-hosts with me today, my colleagues Mary and Bob, who will be speaking to you from the chat. So you're welcome to get involved at the chat at any time. We have a really exciting session here today. And of course, our elephant consultant, Courtney Scott, is going to be our main speaker. She's going to tell us all about the latest 10 worst zoos for elephants. Yeah, Mary and Bob, if you can help with the live stream, then great. But right now I'm not seeing it, so we might have to forego the Facebook Live this time. So I'm just going to, I guess, introduce our wonderful host, Courtney Scott. So Courtney is elephant consultant for Independence of Animals. She is also the founder of nonprofit Free the Oregon Zoo Elephants, a wonderful nonprofit based up in, guess where, Oregon. She has collaborated with IDA for many years to create awareness about the plight of the Oregon Zoo elephants. She is now working on all issues pertaining to captive elephants for IDA, including the brand new list, our annual list of the 10 worst zoos for elephants, which is now in its 20th year. So Courtney, I would love to hand over to you. I will start the screen share.
Thank you, Fleur. So we'll look at the screen in a minute. There's a few text slides there we're going to go through. So yes, this is our 10 worst zoos for elephants, now in our 20th year, as Flora mentioned. And we get to the next slide. And this is our mission. Every year, we release a list of zoos that have earned a spot on our list for elephants in North America. It serves to raise awareness about the plight of elephants in zoos where lack of space, unsuitably cold climates, and unnatural conditions condemn Earth's largest land mammals to lifetimes of deprivation, disease, and early death. Next slide, please. So this is the theme for our TWZ 2024. Too old to breed, too young to die, withering away with no hope of retirement. Zoos perpetuate a vicious cycle of suffering by eagerly replacing aging elephants with ticket-selling babies, condemning more elephants to suffer. Next slide, please. So right now, we're just going to give you a short preview, a 1-minute preview of all the zoos we put on this year's list, and then we'll go into more definition and explanation about each zoo. All right, so that gives you an overview. Stop that video, thank you, and go to our next slide. All right, so the reason we decided to focus on older elephants this year is because they seldom get the kind of attention that they deserve. A lot of them just basically, what zoos call it, is aging out. In other words, they are no longer valuable to zoos because they can't breed. They have a lot of medical issues that cost them money. So they become basically just taking up space. So zoos, what they do then is try to import more elephants or breed more elephants. And the last few years, we've seen a baby boom in zoos across the country and across the world, actually. And this year, we want to honor, we did our list this year in honor of this particular elephant you see right here. His name is Tonka. He's from Zoo Knoxville. And just weeks before he was scheduled to be sent to to the elephant sanctuary in Tennessee, he died. He was euthanized because he had a leg injury and he was in so much pain they had to put him down. And this just goes to prove how tragic it is that elephants live so long that they develop conditions to the point where they are often euthanized. That's usually how they die. And he was only 44 years old. And for a wild elephant, 44 is just about like maybe close to middle age. African elephants in particular are still breeding and reproducing in their 50s. In fact, that's their prime reproductive years, is 50 and on. So at 44, Tonka was a young bull elephant who would have had plenty of years left if he had been in the wild. But anyway, his story highlights the problem and the reason why we chose to focus on this very tragic situation of elephants aging out, ignored, and just taking up space in zoos. So let's go. This is our next slide. So our number one worst zoo this year, once again, is the Los Angeles Zoo, because of the dire situation for these two elephants you see right here. Billy on the left is 40 years old. Tina on the right is 58 years old. 40 for an elephant in a zoo, like we mentioned for Tonka, is getting old. Billy already has many medical issues. He has, and so does Tina, arthritis, joint disease, foot disease, the usual litany of diseases that afflict zoo elephants. And on the left there, you'll see Billy being forced to do a trick, which is to stand on his hind legs and be given a treat. This is to show him off to the visitors. But this is a very dangerous position for an elephant. All their weight is on their back feet, and that can cause them to, first of all, collapse. That's what happened to an elephant in a circus years ago, Stony, and he collapsed and broke his leg. And because of that, he was eventually put down. He just, it just destroyed him. So this is a very dangerous pose. It's a risky pose. And Tina on the right has been at the LA Zoo since 2010. Before that, she was in circuses. So she's had a long life of being controlled by bull hooks and herself forced to do tricks. So we want to get these two elephants out of the LA Zoo and into sanctuary as soon as possible before they die, like the 20 other elephants that have died at the LA Zoo. So next slide. This is an example. Billy right here is trying to reach the foliage outside of his exhibit. This is such a deprivation for elephants in zoos. In the wild, they forage for 20 hours a day. It's their main occupation, and it helps them to stay healthy, physically and mentally healthy, by walking for miles and by foraging on a wide variety of plants, roots, trees. It is just such a horrible, and you can see how desperate Billy is to get to those leaves, those trees outside of his exhibit. Inside his exhibit are wire wrap trees, electrified wire wrap trees, so he's not able to reach the trees inside the exhibit. And this happens in all zoos. It's not just with Billy. On to the next slide, please. This is Tina exhibiting typical stereotypical behavior, which we call zoochotic behavior. And it's seen in almost every zoo. So you can go ahead and play that video. Well, first we're seeing Billy doing his trick. And there's Tina playing in her tiny closet-like enclosure.
What sound does the elephant make?
Here's Billy. This is his typical behavior day after day, year after year. He goes to that gate and just stands there and bobs for hours on end. And this is Tina Stress behavior once again. And actually for Tina, this behavior has dramatically increased since her two companions, Jewel and Shanzi, died last year. So we can go to the next slide. And there we have Billy once again doing the trick. All right, now we're on to the number 2 worst zoo, and that is the Bronx Zoo in New York. On the left, you will see an elephant ironically named Happy, and on the right is Patty. And these two elephants have been at the zoo for decades. They were confiscated and brought to the zoo many, many years ago. And people have been advocating to release them from the Bronx Zoo for just about that many years. There was a lawsuit filed on their behalf in New York by the Non-Human Rights Project. And it's a very difficult challenge, as you can imagine, to get a court to determine that elephants or any animals have rights of any kind. And the rights that they are asking for is simply to give them the freedom to not suffer anymore in confinement and be released to a sanctuary. But, you know, they're going to continue fighting. They're fighting in, like, I think 6 or 7 other zoos to create freedom for elephants. And that's what we're doing too. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. This is the 3rd worst zoo, the Edmonton Valley Zoo in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And right here it says held in a frozen hell for 47 years. This is Lucy, and that is true. She has been held there. And during the winter in Edmonton, it gets to like 30 below freezing. And so most of the time she's indoors in a small barn, and then they often will walk her outdoors for basically a few minutes, right? Otherwise she'd freeze to death. And if you can see in this picture, the keeper is holding a bull hook, and that's how they control her. And she's been controlled this way for her entire life at the zoo. And there is lots of people that love to see Lucy get to sanctuary. There's a huge movement to get her there. And a movie was just released about her situation called Lucy, The Stolen Lives of Elephants. And we'll be screening that movie here in the States before long, and we'll keep you posted about that. But Lucy deserves her freedom. This is just too long for this old elephant, not only to live in this horribly frozen environment, but with no other elephant, no friends at all for the last, I think, 11 years. Okay, this is the number 4 worst zoo, Cameron Park Zoo in Waco, Texas. And poor Timbo here, she's 47. She's been at this zoo for, I think, her entire life. And she's been alone for the last 4 years when Tanya, her companion, died. And this little, exhibit that you see here is a very barren, as usual, exhibit. No grass, no trees. She just walks around the perimeter of that exhibit day after day, and with nothing to do, no elephant to be a companion for. It's just a very sad, solitary, and unnatural life for an elephant. So let's see the next slide. So this is a little video that shows her frustration. Just, what else is she going to do there? So this is how she relieves her tension.
In the 45 minutes to an hour I've been here. She's bored, angry, sad, alone.
Okay, so we can go to the next slide.
She does.
All right, so this is the number 5 worst zoo, Two Tails Ranch in Williston, Florida. Now, Asha has a backstory that possibly many of you already know. She was at the Natural Bridge Zoo in Virginia for many, many years, used to give rides to tourists, sometimes like 100 rides a day. So she's been very seriously exploited and used for many years. And activists have been advocating to get her out of there to sanctuary all that time. But basically, what happened is the owners of Two Tails Ranch kind of snuck her out. without even proper permits. So now she's residing at this Two Tails Ranch, where she's in a situation where the elephants there are all exploited. They're rented out for parties. They're also give rides. They're just, controlled by bull hooks. So it's pretty much the worst situation for elephants, a combination of exploitative and brutal treatment with confinement in a small space with nothing to do. So that's poor Asha. So we're advocating to get her to finally get to a sanctuary. And this little video will show her how stressed out she is while she's exhibiting the typical zoochotic behavior. I just want to point out while Asha's doing this, zookeepers at the LA Zoo said this kind of behavior was showing that they were excited to see their keeper. So you can imagine how ridiculous that statement is, because she's by herself all alone doing this. And just like all the elephants that we see, they're both basically spend their time alone doing this kind of behavior. So we don't think they're excited to see their keeper. So we can go on to the next zoo. Okay, this is number 6, the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado Springs. This zoo claims to be a kind of a retirement home for senior elephants, but basically it's kind of a living hell. In fact, it's one of the worst zoos I've ever seen. They've got about 1 acre for these 5 elephants, and they exhibit some of the worst zoochotic behavior I've seen anywhere in any zoo. Well, kind of on a par with the Houston Zoo. But anyway, they live in this tiny space. They're used to do like painting and yoga and all these things that are, that tourists like, the visitors like. But it's just another case of anthropomorphic projection, thinking that elephants like to paint. That's not something that elephants do. So there's like nothing natural about their life in the zoo. And they call them the Golden Girls. That's their name for them at the zoo. And once again, there's a lawsuit to try to get these elephants out of this zoo and into sanctuary. So we can go on to the next slide. And here's a little a little video. It looks to me like this elephant is trying to break out of her enclosure. And often these fencings are wired. So what I've learned is a lot of times the elephants will just endure the bolt, the zap from the electric wire, because they're so desperate to either reach forage or to get out. So look at and see for yourself.
Oh. He's gonna break the thing trying to get out the lettuce. He knows that it's eating.
And also what we saw at that zoo, just a little note on that, is the noise level. Now, the noise level at all zoos is extremely high because the kids are screaming. There's all kinds of trains and other kinds of activity going on. So it's just a din, an enormous din. And elephants, as you may know, can hear for 2 miles. So this is especially harmful to them. It's harmful to all their senses in every way, but the hearing is one that you often don't think about. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so this is the number 7 worst zoo, the Topeka Zoo in Topeka, Kansas. These 2 senior elephants, Cora and Timbo. Cora is 65 and Timbo is, I believe, 47. And they've been there their whole life. They were stolen from the wild, and this is where they've been, in this tiny enclosure. The one thing we can say, at least they have each other, unlike some of these other zoos that we see, like poor Timbo at the Waco Zoo. So that's one thing that's better. But they are also exploited, to do yoga and tricks and all these kind of things for tourists, even though at their advanced age, they should just be able to retire at least. But it's just, if they can't breed them, they're going to exploit them. So we go on to the next one. Okay, right here, you're going to see these 2 elephants being exploited to paint. And basically they put the paint right on their tusks, excuse me, on their trunk. And who knows what that paint does to them. But it's just so they can sell those paintings to the tourists and make some money off of the elephants. We can go on to the next slide. We're on to this number 8 Worth Zoo, the Little Rock Zoo in Arkansas. And this is Babe and Xena. And there's one is like in her 60s. I think they're both in their 60s. And there was another elephant, Sophie, who just died last year. She was in her 50s, and she suffered for 7 years from another condition that elephants have. And it's just, she suffered for all those years. So it's just sad that she couldn't have at least a few days, a few months in sanctuary before she died. So we're trying to get these 2 senior elephants so the same thing doesn't happen to them and they die. And these elephants too are exploited. They're used to do elephant encounters, they call it, where people can come in and do bathing. They give little lotteries, so the person who wins gets to bathe the elephants. And for an elephant to allow someone to get that close to them and bathe them, especially someone they don't know, they've had years of training with bull hooks. And these elephants have had that training, because it's only been recently, in the last few years, that the Association of Zoos and Aquariums has banned the use of bull hooks. So the elephants now are supposed to be only accessed in protected contact with a barrier. But these elephants were trained for years with bull hooks, so they can still exploit them for tourist tricks, tourist participation. So we can see a little stereotypical behavior, zoochotic behavior. This is Sophie. Sophie's the elephant who was euthanized about 6 months ago. And this is called, the thing that she's doing is called a trunk twirling, which is a form of zoochotic behavior that we've seen in a few elephants. This is not something elephants do in the wild. And Joyce Poole, a renowned elephant expert who studied elephants in the wild for 40 years, said she has never once seen an elephant do any stereotypical behavior, not once. So we know that this is not something natural. It is totally caused by living in confinement in a zoo. So this is our number 9 Worth Zoo, the Cincinnati Zoo. And this zoo has 2 senior elephants that need to go to sanctuary right now. Shotzi, let's see, I'll have to look that one up. But Shotzi, let's see, who's Shotzi? Sorry, guys, I'm forgetting the name of the other one. But the main thing, there's 2 of them that need to go right now. They're in their 40s and 50s. But there's a total of 8 elephants that live at this zoo. And they call it a huge expansion because they expanded to 5 acres, and they consider that huge. But for 8 elephants, that is so small, so small. It would be small for 1 elephant. What this zoo did is they're breeding, and they just imported 4 elephants from the Dublin Zoo in Ireland to breed more. So these 2 elephants we want to get out right away, and then start the process of ending all breeding in this zoo, because they don't have enough space, and it's just, inflicting more lifetimes of cruelty and confinement for more elephants. So this is a little a little video that's just showing you the exhibit, and kind of like what I see it as is showing prisoners in a prison yard. What do? They're in a barrier, there. They can't reach each other. They just walk around in this barren exhibit for their entire lives. And this is their expanded exhibit that they brag about at the Cincinnati Zoo. So this is our number 10 Worth Zoos, the Phoenix Zoo. The Phoenix Zoo has 1 solitary elephant, Indu, and she's been at the zoo for 26 years, but she was captured in the wild at 1 year old. and brought to other zoos. So she's been in confinement in zoos for 58 of her 59 years. So we are advocating to get her to sanctuary before she dies, like the other 2 elephants that just died a few years ago at this zoo. So, and you can see, we'll show you her behavior. She also has pronounced zoochotic behavior, living in this tiny, barren exhibit. And we advocate not only to get this elephant to sanctuary, but in the meantime, to at least provide her with some deep shade and some misters, because in Phoenix, it gets to be over 100 in the summers. And we don't see any deep shade there. And her pool is so shallow. And she also has to trade her exhibit with a rhinoceros next door. So she doesn't even have access to the shallow pool for all the time. And there is an alert. In fact, most of these zoos have alerts that you can sign and help us get these elephants to sanctuary. And we've got them all listed in the chat, I believe. Mary's put them there.
Yes, and I would like to thank you, Courtney, for that really terribly sad overview of the 10 worst zoos. It's really crushing to hear these individual cases, and so very many elephants suffering in zoos across North America. I would like to, I think probably, I've got lots of questions myself, and I think Mary has been taking some questions from everyone who has been writing them in the chat. If you still have questions, please do write them down now, and Mary will read them out. So Mary, do you have any questions for Courtney?
Yeah, there was one that came up. Let me fix our pin situation if I can. Do you want to there we go. Okay. Hi. All right. So yeah, Courtney, we had one question that came up. Let me go get it. And it was, if these older elephants are older with medical issues, what is impeding the zoos from sending them to sanctuaries? Logistically, why aren't they if they're just a burden to them financially?
You know, that's a good question. We don't know all the answers, to be honest with you. The zoo will say what they claim is they're too old for transport. It's too hard on them to be transported. However, zoos transport elephants around all the time. And many elephants have been transported in Asia, even older elephants in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s to sanctuary. And in Asia, they don't have modern transport. They have like old rickety trucks. They go across rutted roads for, you know, sometimes hundreds of miles. So we don't find that that claim to be credible. I think part of the reason is, and I'm just speculating here, because who controls the zoos is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And part of the reason I believe is they don't want to set a precedent for allowing activists, first of all, to advocate to send elephants to zoos and be successful at it. They want to keep elephants in zoos because they are, even the old sick ones, can provide more income to the zoo. So that's what I'm assuming is true. So if there's any other question about that, let me know. But that's what I know.
Thank you so much. That was, yeah, a really interesting question there. Mary, are there any other questions?
That was the
If
only
not,
one
I have
that
plenty.
copied. Yeah, that was the only
Okay,
one.
If I could,
well,
I could jump in with something. We've had people sign our alert to, and this is related to what you were talking about earlier. We've had people sign our alert to free Lucy in Alberta, and occasionally we get a response. And Alberta is doing what you say. They, in their letter, in their response to our alert, they've said Lucy is in great health. She's been examined by all these vets, and then they turn around and say, "Oh, she's too ill to move." So which one is it?
Right. Well, that's a good question. And the issue with that is there were 4 vets who examined Lucy. 4 of them are actually connected to the zoo industry. 2 of them were completely independent. The 2 independent vets said that she could go to Sanctuary. They assessed her and they figured even back about 2 years ago, they said she could go. Now, after the assessment by the 4 vets, the zoo sided with the 2 zoo related vets and said, no, she can't go, because they said, no, she can't go, right? However, during those 2 years, the zoo has made improvements for Lucy, and they've determined her health is better now. They're saying that the only reason she can't go is she still has some breathing issues. However, one of the independent vets has said she does not have breathing issues. So what we say is they should bring back those 2 independent vets, reassess her again. And I believe that one of the organizations that provided the 2 vets, the independent vets, has now said they agree that she should go to Sanctuary. So all that it's really waiting for really is for the Edmonton City Council to make the decision, because the Edmonton City Council has oversight of this public zoo. Just like in Toronto, the Toronto City Zoo voted to send the Toronto elephants to Paws Sanctuary, despite the zoo saying no. So that is really where the next action has to happen. And we're very hopeful because of this new movie that's out. We believe that's going to put more pressure on the city council and the zoo to do the right thing for Lucy.
Yeah, well, thank you so very much for explaining the situation there with Lucy, and everyone who has signed and shared our alert to make that happen. So yes, please do keep on signing and sharing that alert for Lucy. You'll find the link to that and all of our elephant actions in the chat. And that's an interesting point there. You mentioned that some elephants have been successfully released from zoos. Could you give us a bit of an idea of how that's going? You know, are we seeing any real momentum towards elephants being freed from zoos?
Yes. Well, Flora, as we know, 38 zoos have closed their elephant exhibits. So this is wonderful news. 3 more have promised to send their elephants to close their elephant exhibit once their last elephant dies. And we are waiting for the Louisville Zoo to send Mickey and Punch. I believe they're going this year to a sanctuary. So in all, there's 41 zoos that will in time be closing their elephant exhibit. So in California, I want to mention that 6 zoos have closed their elephant exhibit, and we're deeply hopeful that the LA Zoo will close its exhibit, and that would make it 7. So that's kind of the, a real record right there in California.
That's absolutely fantastic. And if anyone is joining from LA, we want to say a big thank you for joining our latest rally, which happened last Saturday, to free Billy and Tina. It was a huge success. Yeah, please just help us keep up the pressure. We have had an amazing development from that rally. We had one of our good friends, a philanthropist, David Castleman, who runs EcoFlix, and the EcoFlix Foundation has offered to pay for Billy and Tina to be transferred to his sanctuary in Cambodia and to pay for their lifetime care. So really all we're asking is for the city council to just make that happen. Nothing, they don't need to pay a penny. That is all taken care of for them. So we're really close, I think, on this one. I really hope so. So as with the LA Zoo and all of the zoos, please do keep on taking action. Every time you sign an IDA alert, you are not just signing a petition. Your signature gets delivered via email. An email message gets sent automatically to a decision maker or decision makers on your behalf. So even though you're just putting in your details and clicking, you're actually taking a huge and very impactful range of actions. So thank you for what you've done so far. It's definitely making a difference. Mary, are there any more questions? I saw maybe some coming in.
Yeah, I noticed I hadn't looked at the Q&A yet. I think you already answered one of the questions. One of them was here. It says, are you likely to be successful in getting any of these elephants to sanctuary? As in, like, do any of them look promising? But I think we already have a few successes that we can go over.
Well, we just mentioned there's 38 that have closed
Right.
up exhibit.
And just recently,
Latest one was, we can talk about that a little bit, I guess. The latest one was here in California, was the Oakland Zoo. They have sent their last elephant, Osh, to Sanctuary, and they admitted publicly that their space is not big enough for elephants. And I consider that a major admission on a zoo's part, because zoos are always saying, well, as soon as we expand to 6 acres, which is actually fairly large for an elephant exhibit, many of them are only 1 or 2 acres. So, and by the way, that's less than 1% of an elephant's smallest home range. So for the Oakland Zoo to admit that there's 6 acres, which is considered large, is not enough space for elephants, is something we're very hopeful will pass on to all the other zoos and get on board with doing the right thing for these elephants, because lack of space is the single most damaging thing for elephants, both mentally and physically.
Mhm.
So that was a huge, huge step for that
It
zoo.
was, yeah. Someone also asked if tax dollars go to Edmonton Zoo.
Yes,
They do, okay.
it's a public zoo. Yes, it's owned and it's not operated by, but it's owned by the city of Edmonton. Well, I
Okay.
guess they do operate it. I'm not quite clear on that, but you know, the actual operation may be different entities, but they have control over it. Yes, their tax dollars support it, right?
Mhm. There's another question Judy had. Does Carol Buckley have an elephant sanctuary? If so, that would be 3 sanctuaries. I think
Yes,
that is the person who started Elephant Aid International. Is that correct?
that's correct. Yes, thank
Yeah.
you for bringing that question up, Judy. Carol has a sanctuary in Georgia, and it's called Elephant Refuge North America. She now has 3 elephants, 2 Asian and 1 African, and they all get along beautifully. If you go to her website, to her videos, you'll see it for yourself. And Carol is an expert working with elephants, so I consider her another valuable resource to take elephants. And I consider her a consultant, because Carol has so many, well, I don't think over 40 years now working with elephants in Asia and here in the US. And
Mhm.
she did co-found the Elephant Sanctuary. She and Scott Bias started that sanctuary in 1995, something like that.
Mhm.
And am I right in thinking that Carol was recently a guest on one of our webinars? But so that
Yes,
so
she
you
was.
can check it out. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can check out that interview with Carol Buckley and find out a bit more about what it takes to run an elephant sanctuary.
Thanks for reminding us about that.
Remember.
And we have a playlist, the TWZ playlist, so you can just go to that, right? Floor?
Yeah.
Great.
I just found the webinar that you're talking about, pasting that in
Great.
chat.
Yes, that in the chat. Good.
There you go. For anyone who's interested.
Do we have any more questions?
Not that I know
I have lots of questions. I would guess I would like to ask you, Courtney, you mentioned about the fact that elephants don't have enough space in zoos, and it was really interesting to hear that they have less than 1% of their smallest natural range. That's just so shocking and heartbreaking. Um, I know that you've also mentioned that some of them they maybe solitary elephants, or they have only one companion. Could you tell us a bit about like why is that important to elephants?
Well, in the wild, elephants live in matriarchal herds. You know, their moms, their aunts, their grandmas, they live together for life. And they have extended family, extended circle of friends too. So this is what's natural to them. So you're basically stripping them of what is a natural innate behavior. And really, honestly, it's just like any human, unless you're some kind of hermit, you need human companionship throughout your life, right? I mean, it's pretty simple, actually. And elephants are probably one of the most socially complex animals there are. And so it's a huge deprivation for them to be solitary. And it wasn't until fairly recently that scientists understood that it's the same for male elephants as it is for female elephants. They always knew that female elephants, because they're moms, they have families, they needed the companionship and the mentorship of their herd. Male elephants will go away from the herd at a certain point to live on their own or form bachelor herds, but they come back to the matriarchal herd and they have friends. They have bachelor herds. They don't live alone. So this is a deprivation for both male and female elephants. So that, yeah, that's another huge cruelty. And actually, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums standards of care dictate that they have at least 3 elephants. So every zoo that only has 1 elephant is not in adherence with that regulation. So they get what's called a exemption from the AZA, which I don't think that gives the elephants much solace.
Absolutely. That's incredibly sad. I have many more follow-up questions, but I believe we may have had another question come in, Mary.
Thanks. There was one question about the Disney Animal Kingdom. If we have any things to say about that location.
Tell me which one. There's one in New Jersey. Is there another one they're talking about?
It wasn't specified, but I went to Florida, but if there's one in New Jersey, I imagine that's also a question.
The reason I know a little bit more about the one in New Jersey. There is a campaign right now by World Animal Protection that we will advocate for as well, is to free one of the elephants there, Joyce, because the claim is she's been alone for a long time. So yeah, that is a concern for that. And it's kind of they have a, what do you call those, merry-go-round thing, not a merry-go-round, a roller coaster. So the concern too is how close are those elephants to that roller coaster? It's an amusement park is what it is. That has elephants.
Yeah.
So now I've been in touch with the zoo director myself there and chatted back and forth with him. And of course he feels the elephants are doing fine.
Yeah.
That's typical, but you know.
What about in Florida?
That one I'm be honest with you, I don't know as much about. Yeah, they have quite a few elephants there, as I recall.
Yeah.
And that's yet another kind of an amusement park area. And I believe they breed them there as well. Yeah.
Oof. Yeah, unfortunately, there are so many different abusive places holding elephants. I believe there's around, am I right in thinking there's around 300 elephants in captivity in the United States, Courtney?
Close to 300, right? And right now I haven't kept the latest count because they just had a whole bunch of babies. So could be more.
So more.
Right.
Yeah. Mary, were there any more questions?
Not that I know of. There is a question about the Tennessee Sanctuary.
Okay.
So just wanted to know what our opinion is, I guess, our connection with them.
Well, you know, we support all elephant sanctuaries. And the elephant sanctuary has quite a few elephants. And the thing about the elephant sanctuary that is new in the last few years, they've gotten an accreditation from, or some kind of accreditation from the AZA, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So it's more likely, frankly, that accredited zoos are going to send their elephants to the elephant sanctuary. That's just because they're accredited by the AZA. So it's a little harder for the other 2 sanctuaries to get elephants. So, you know, we're not in the business of saying any sanctuary is good or bad. We're saying they're all, as long as they treat the elephants well, you know, that is our main concern. And to my knowledge, all 3 of them do.
Right.
I've been to Paws Sanctuary. I've seen that for myself. The others I've seen videos of, and I know Carol personally, and I'm very confident of her treatment of elephants. And the same with Tess. They know how to take care of elephants.
I think the big decider, I mean, for me, for my ethics, is if we're letting the elephants make their own choices and they have the capacity to make
Right.
their own choices. The thing is, in zoos, they just don't do that. They
No.
put them in this limited location that doesn't have them able to choose where to go when they want to go, hang out with the elephants they want to hang out with the people they want to hang out with, go where they want, you know, roam as far as they want to roam naturally, you know,
Word roam. There's no roaming in a zoo.
no roaming, right? But the single acre, you know, it's so small.
Yeah.
And when I'm just gonna put your piece about fake sanctuaries versus real sanctuaries in there for people to get a better idea of the kinds of reasonings we have for what makes the sanctuary a sanctuary and what makes someone just calling their location a sanctuary, but it's really not. So that's all on that link I just put in the chat as well.
Thank you
I
very much.
had,
Yeah.
oh, someone asked about the
Okay.
San Diego Zoo. What
Oh.
are your thoughts on them? San Diego Zoo, not
They do a lot of breeding. They have elephants there they stole from Africa. And they're connected with what's called now the San Diego Safari Park.
hmm,
That's has a brutal history.
hmm,
I think one of the elephants there, Madunda, was beaten severely quite a few years ago, but it resulted in a new law in California against the brutalization, the abuse of elephants, because this elephant was beaten for 2 days. And, you know, so there's this a long history of abuse of the San Diego park and the stealing of elephants from Africa. So, yeah, not good.
Mm. You mentioned there actually about that link with breeding, and you mentioned that that's kind of maybe not such a good thing. You would have thought, you know, I think zoos make a lot of their claims saying, oh, you know, well, this is all for conservation. Elephants face lots of threats in the wild. Why is it actually not such a good thing?
Well, because they're condemning them to a lifetime in prison. So that is not conservation. The meaning of conservation literally is to rehab a species, an animal, and then release them back to the wild. And that does happen in Africa, and it does happen in Asia. It doesn't happen in a US zoo or any North American zoo. They're just kept in captivity for their entire life until they die. And they have no opportunity to live their life as a real elephant. So you know, if you see an animal in a zoo, what are you learning about that animal? They don't behave like they do in the wild.
Yeah.
They behave like captured beings. They behave like prisoners.
Mhm.
So it's giving a false information and a false education.
Mm.
That
And at the same
go ahead.
Sorry, at the same time, I don't understand, why do they need to import elephants and, as you mentioned, steal them from Africa and Asia? Why do they need to do that if they're breeding them in captivity?
They're running out of elephants.
Mhm.
There's an article done a few years ago by the Seattle Times called Glamour Beasts. And he did a deep dive into the whole issue of breeding. And basically, AZA zoos and all zoos are running low on elephants. They can't breed them fast enough. First of all, breeding is very difficult in zoos. The elephants are under a lot more stress than they are in the wild. They have a lot of stillbirths. They have a lot of early deaths, a lot of failed pregnancies, a lot of miscarriages, a lot of trouble even getting them pregnant. They resort to using artificial insemination, but that doesn't always work. They try to breed, you know, even in the wild, elephants only breed ever so often, right? It's when they're in estrus, the female's in estrus, and that doesn't happen every month, right? So they're very hard to breed. And add all that to living in a complex, stressful situation with no space. Elephants aren't behaving naturally. They don't breed naturally either. So they're running out of elephants. That's the reason they do that.
That's, yeah, incredibly sad that for all they say about, you know, conservation and doing good work and education, zoos, it seems, are actually killing elephants faster than they can reproduce, which is, yeah, terribly sad. And in addition to keeping them in absolutely terrible conditions. But I want to say thank you so much, Courtney, for dedicating your life to helping these very important animals, very charismatic animals, and very socially and intelligent animals who I think hold a special place in many of our hearts. So thank you for what you do for the elephants. Thank you for what you do for In Defense of Animals. I know that there's an absolute wealth of information on our website. So if you want to do a deep dive on why captivity is harmful to elephants, you can find out all of the information you would ever need to know. And you can take action. Vitally, please keep taking action for these elephants, because this is one of those campaigns where we are winning. As Courtney mentioned, around 40 zoos have closed or are closing their elephant exhibits. People are realizing maybe this isn't such a good idea to keep elephants in captivity any longer. So please keep up the great work. Thank you so much for continuing to support us. And I will share my screen one last time so that you can see where we are. I would like to, oops, here we go. That's if you want to become an elephant supporter, an elephant defender, you can go to our website, idausa.org/donate. We don't receive any government funding, and unlike zoos, city-run zoos, we don't receive any tax dollars either. So we entirely depend on kind people like you who really care about elephants, and you are few and far between. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to attend our webinar. Any closing thoughts from the rest of the team, and Courtney?
Oh, I just want to say thank you guys so much for joining us today. It's really great to have you as supporters for elephants. I totally appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.